Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday, and today's another lab review. So recently had a consultation with somebody who their primary reason for the consultation was to find out, do they need thyroid medication or not? This is a person who's a pretty healthy person based on the information I had. No real signs or symptoms, eats a really pretty clean, whole food based diet, works out every day of the week, doesn't really have any complaints, but they're trying to be as healthy as they can be. They went to their functional or integrative practitioner, had a comprehensive set of labs done, and these were the thyroid this is the thyroid panel that was run. TSH 3.9. The functional practitioner or integrative practitioner thought this is too high. They wanted the value in between 1 and 2, and they said this is a person who's developing a thyroid condition. Free T4, 1.33, which is in the normal, maybe somebody's optimal range. Free T3 is within the lab range, but typically below what most people would say is an optimal range. Reverse T3 is within the lab reference range. It's within my optimal range, but this practitioner thought this was too high. They wanted it lower. They wanted under 12, under 10. And then I put the free T3 to free T4 in. I'll talk about that in a second. So this person's integrative practitioner looking at these labs said, you're hypothyroid, we're gonna prescribe Armour to help increase that T3 and lower the TSH. The patient was confused. I feel good, I function good. Do I really need this? So they go off to their allopathic physician, their primary care physician, show them these labs, say, hey, the integrated practitioner wants to put me on Armour. Do I have hypothyroidism? And the allopathic physician said, you don't have hypothyroidism, you don't need thyroid medication, and advised against it. Which led her to me and said, now I'm confused. I got an integrated practitioner saying I am hypothyroid. I've got the allopathic physician saying I'm not hypothyroid. Am I hypothyroid? Do I need thyroid medication? So in this situation, I look at these numbers and on the surface, I would say, it does look like there's potentially some tissue hypothyroidism going on where there's reduced conversion of T4 to T3. But that can be relative to what they eat, how hard they worked out the day before, how long they've been fasting, and a number of various factors. Labs can fluctuate, so we have to take that into consideration. If this was a common pattern and the person had lots of signs and symptoms, then we might be considering this is a person who's got some type of cell stress response going on where they're getting reduced T4 to T3 conversion. But this patient's asymptomatic, so we looked at the rest of their blood labs. Their glucose was within the optimal range. Their fasting insulin was in the optimal range. Their hemoglobin A1C was in the optimal range. Typically, if somebody's going to have tissue hypothyroidism going on or glandular hypothyroidism, we're not producing enough thyroid hormone to be in circulation and get into the tissues, their glucose regulation is going to start to be altered. And hers wasn't, and she didn't have signs and symptoms of blood glucose dysregulation. We also looked at her lipid panel. Her lipid panel was perfect. So there was no problems with triglycerides, cholesterol, LDL, HDL, VLDL. They were all within the optimal ranges. So in this situation, it didn't look like there was any problems with lipid regulation. And if somebody has reduced T3 in the cells, in the tissues, you're typically going to start to see some changes in lipids, okay? Cholesterol is going to start to rise. LDL is going to start to rise. HDL could be high or low depending on what's going on. So in this situation, in looking at her health history, her signs and symptoms, these labs, the rest of the metabolic panel, I agree with the allopathic physician. This is not a person who has glandular hypothyroidism going on, at least based on the labs we have, her signs and symptoms, her history. But I would prefer to have total T4 in there, total T3 as well, if we're going to run them, to find out if the gland is making enough thyroid hormone. It appears like it is. There's no signs or symptoms. The rest of the lab values look appropriate. So I agree with the allopathic physician. This is not a person who has hypothyroidism. At least they don't have glandular hypothyroidism, and T4 and T3 medication like an Armour is not appropriate. In my opinion, I don't prescribe, but it's not appropriate in this situation. So I've said, no, I don't think you have a thyroid condition. I would not recommend that you start Armour. And here's the problem. If she did start on Armour, that would lower her TSH. it would probably raise her free T3 depending on when she took her next set of labs in correlation or in relationship to when she took her thyroid medication. If she took that Armour medication in the morning and then had her blood draw a couple hours later, sure, her free T3 levels would look better. Her reverse T3 levels would probably be a little bit lower because that added T3 into the system, and T4 is going to suppress TSH. When you suppress that TSH, you're going to get decreased total T4 production. And if there's decreased total T4 production, the free T4 could stay the same, but the reverse T3 levels are probably going to go down because there's less T4 available. So I don't think that it's a good situation. And their literature says that probably 90% of the people on thyroid medication were misdiagnosed and put on it inappropriately. And I think this would have been a case where this person started on Armour, maybe even got a little hit of, maybe would feel a little bit different, a little bit better, maybe short term, but would have wound up developing a glandular problem because of the thyroid medication. And in a short period of time, the low level of Armour, half a grain of Armour, probably would have started to cause a glandular problem, and then she probably would have needed to increase the dose. So I get a lot of patients that have labs very similar to this and get prescribed medication and then get on this roller coaster ride of trying to find a magic dose that's going to fix their thyroid physiology. And the real fix is that they shouldn't have been on it at all, and they need to come off of that medication and allow the gland to recover. So this is a case where this person shouldn't have been diagnosed as hypothyroidism, shouldn't be put on Armour medication. And as long as they feel and function better, the best thing to do is rerun that panel, in another month or two, see where their labs are. This time, make sure they didn't do an aggressive workout the day before, maybe just a 12-hour fast and no longer fast than that. And let's see where the thyroid panel, and get the totals as well, and see where the rest of the panel, blood glucose markers, liver markers, renal markers, lipid markers, see where those are. If they all look good, patient feels and functions good, and TSH is a little above somebody's optimal range, and free T3 is a little bit below somebody's optimal range, and maybe reverse T3 is a little bit above the optimal range, and even if that free T3 to free T4 ratio is off a little bit, this isn't a situation where we should be prescribing Armour. I would suggest against it. I'll do another video with a little different scenario where maybe the person's symptomatic and the labs were off. But for this person in this situation, this is a case where they probably would have been misdiagnosed with hypothyroidism, put on medication, and started on the nasty roller coaster ride of trying to find a magic dose, because the getting started probably would have screwed up their thyroid physiology and not helped their overall thyroid physiology or their overall health. If you have any questions, put them below this video. Hope this helps.